Michael Meyer, if you don't know who I am, I'm the sort of overall coordinator for Gold Beach Nero for our entire neighborhood of 200 households. If you don't know what Nero is, it stands for Neighborhood Emergency Response Organization. On Vashon Island, there's 250 plus Neros, which are generally groups of neighbors, on average 10 households, that just agree to mutually support and check on each other, basically, is really what it is neighbors helping neighbors. Because we have 200 households in this neighborhood, we've broken the neighborhood into zones, Nero zones, of, on average, 10 houses. Each zone has a captain or two. We always need captains. We're a little short. There's a couple zones that don't have a captain right now, so if you're willing to check on your neighbors, you know, there's a sign-up sheet on the table. We can tell you what it's all about. It's light duty, but it's really important. It's a way for us to gather information during a big emergency about the condition of your neighbors. Do they need help? Are they all good? And then report that to the fire department efficiently for the whole neighborhood. Say, hey, Gold Beach is doing fine, go help somebody else. Or, gosh, we've got a lot of problems here. Big earthquake, a bunch of stuff has fallen down. So one thing the Gold Beach Nero does is we host events like this. Not a ton of them, but occasionally we'll do like first aid training. We've done first aid training in this building. We did a little open house on how to build a household emergency preparedness kit. So in that vein, we organized this discussion on wildfire danger and what can we as a neighborhood do to support the fire department with regard to fires. And part of the incentive for this was, you'll notice a scorch mark on the outside of our building. That was last year, 4th of July. It was last year, right? Yeah. Somebody was shooting off fireworks down here, and being conscientious, they put their debris in the plastic trash can that we had setting up against the building, and it was still hot. And it started an incipient fire against the wall of our building here. It got stopped, but the scorch mark there is a reminder. And as Roger suggested, we put the a metal can away from the building in case somebody does that again. So Roger Deaver is as part of our Nero group, is our wildfire leader. He's put together a wildfire action plan that we're going to get some feedback from the fire department on. And so the incentive for this talk was that incident and the fact that we have 230 acres of undeveloped fuel basically next to us, and a lot of dry summers recently. So anything we can learn about how to report efficiently incipient fires to the fire department and what actions we can take, I think is all to the good. It's a serious danger, especially as things get drier and drier. So very happy to have Chief Krevik and Chief Kranzovich here to talk to us about wildfire danger. Really appreciate you guys taking a Sunday afternoon to come talk to us. And I think with that, I'll hand it over to you guys, Chiefs.
All right, you want to start running? Yeah, okay. I'm just going to move around to the other side here.
Yeah, well, you got to go that way.
So as Chief comes around, let me introduce him. Chief Kranzovich is both an employee and a volunteer of the district. He's responsible for keeping all of our apparatus operational as the senior mechanic on the island for the district. But he's also an assistant chief of volunteers and has been so for many years, I think over 30. We're very fast approaching the job there.
Well, my number is 40 in October.
Okay, well over 30.
I know, I don't look
And the other privilege we have, and why we brought and asked Chief to be here, is he is our expert on wildfire. Chief's been deploying across the state and even as far as California to fight wildland fire, and is well recognized in the state as a wildland fire, dare I say, expert. He's certainly a senior member and well received. So Brett will start talking, and then I'm just kind of comic relief at this point. I'll just fill in what I can. Certainly answer any questions you have about the district and the island, and maybe compliment what he says later on. Thank you.
And so, comic relief is how I like to start things because, quite frankly, I'm not a great public speaker. But who knows who Mike Kirk is, right? Mike Kirk on the island. All right, so he's like 70 going on 30. He looks younger than he is. I always claim that he's got the Dick Clark mentality because Dick Clark always looked like he was 40 when he was 100. And that's kind of like me. I mean, yeah, I've been in the fire department for 40 years. I'm 55 years old this year. So, what can I say? I actually was 16, so there's an overlap. But yeah, we were allowed to join the fire department back then at 16. We responded from the high school to fires and to aid calls. We had all kinds of fun. It was a great time, and kind of stuck with it. My family has lived on this island. I'm third generation. My grandparents immigrated from Croatia and moved to Dockman. And my father was in the fire department for 50 years. My mother, 28. My brother, 25. My sister, 25. My wife, 20. So on and so forth. The list of over 200 years of volunteer service on Vashon Island. So we've had a very long, loving career with the fire service in Vashon Island and a vested interest here. So that is my history. I somehow got into the wildland thing back in the 90s, and I never looked back. I do that and I enjoy it. The hillside over here we lovingly refer to as Gold Beach Bluff. I've been on pretty much every fire that thing has burned. So, of course now it's overrun with poison oak and it's very toxic. But it's very toxic to fight, to breathe that smoke and to get it on you. So we have to be very cautious when that does go. And I don't believe it's been several years.
It's been a couple of years now.
It's been since we've had to actually go up and deal with fire up there, which is good and bad. I mean, everything's grown up. But you know, some of the things that you know I want to talk about is, you know, the news media has been very diligent about informing everybody about how bad and critical the fire season is this year. Just know that we're not there yet. We have basically, we've had a stall. Anybody familiar with Cliff Mass's weather with the University of Washington? All right, he came out about a week and a half ago and said all of a sudden we're unseasonably cooler than we expected. It's going to increase, but for what does that mean for us? On May 20th, the governor released a drought map for Western Washington, and we weren't in it. We were in the middle of it. The drought was in the mountains, and how they were determining that was the river flows. The river flows weren't producing as much as they thought, so they based that part of the drought conversation. And Seattle, Tacoma, Vashon, right dead in the middle. We just weren't in that drought yet. So far so good is what I'm trying to say. I'm not seriously concerned yet about what has been going on around here. Current temperature at my house in Dockton is 69 degrees and the humidity is 64%. What does that mean? It's really hard to start a fire right now. It's just the 64% humidity makes it very difficult to light a fire. Now, can you start one? You bet you can. You get something hot enough, you get something to carry, it will start. But it's not as easy as throwing a match on the ground and lighting the brush on fire. I'm not saying it can't happen, because it certainly can. Anything will burn, and it will burn in the winter as well. I mean, you know, as long as there's a heat source and there's a bit of wind. But, you know, one of the things that we always have here when we get this beautiful sunny weather in the summer is we get a north wind. You know, we get a high pressure system that builds, and we get a bit of a north wind. It's always pushing constantly 8 to 10 miles an hour, gusting to 15 in the summer. That's generally what our wind pattern is. How does that relate to you here? It's coming this way across the hillside, and if the fire starts down low, and I trust the main concern is starting down over here or on the other side.
Right.
Basically, fire burns uphill and it preheats and it continues to grow fast, but there's not going to be a lot of wind that's going to help carry that up, because whereas you do get a certain amount of that north wind that comes over and eddies back and pulls up, it's not like having a south wind 20 miles an hour coming and pushing the fire. You know, fortunately, that's a good thing. I've never seen a fire on the hillside over here push past the top road, the road that accesses up there. We've always been able to stop it there, even when we had less people, even when we had less vehicles and water resources. So we've always been very good about stopping it there. I'm not saying it can't happen, certainly, but we just haven't had to deal with it past there yet. And with the, what is it, the blueberry field they planted up there? What did the county plant up on top?
Oh, yeah, a bunch of native species.
Yeah,
Multiple
yeah.
stuff.
You know, I mean, that in itself can be a fire break, because it's not overgrown like it used to be. I mean, it used to be Scotch broom, it used to be blackberries, it used to be,
Yeah.
you know, grasses. So that in itself is as well as a fire break for us. Can it burn? Yeah, you bet it can, but we can control it a little quicker if it gets to that point. And how do we do that? The differences between fighting wildfire in eastern Washington with that truck I brought out here with 250 gallons of water, and what we do here is we've got pretty good water supplies. We've got tenders with 3,000 gallons of water we can deliver fairly quickly. If nothing else, we can pre-treat the grounds before the fire gets to it. And what I mean by that is we will literally spray the unburned fuels and we will wet it down so it's hard to burn. And then we'll get in and we'll dig it up and with hand tools and we'll make sure that it doesn't progress. So we have that luxury here. You have a pretty decent water system here with decent hydrants. We can refill quickly. We can run down to Dockman Park and refill off the Dockman system, because they've got a really good system down there with a nice hot hydrant, which means we can fill up fairly quickly and get back up here with our large water tenders. So we have good water supplies. Now, with all that being said, certainly there always is concern, and you guys living here, there's a concern. So if the fire gets rocking up the hill and starts undercutting us and coming around and coming up underneath the houses on top of the hill, which I've never seen it do that yet, but it can't say, I'm not going to say that it cannot happen, because it certainly can. You know, one of the first things if you're home to do, and understanding that you have a limited water system, but one of the first things you can do is you can put your sprinklers out, have your sprinklers set out on your grasses out there, and get them going. Pre-treat your own front yard, and then leave. I can't tell you to leave. Washington State does not make you guys leave your houses. You know, as a firefighter, I tell you to leave. But I'll also tell you that a lot of houses have been saved by the homeowners with garden houses. California, they have been making people leave. They're starting to rethink that. When they have a wildfire go through neighborhoods down there, they basically have made, and they've arrested people for getting to their homes. Washington, they can arrest you if they put us under a level 3 evacuation notice, but they can arrest you if you come back in, but if you don't leave, they can't arrest you. In California, they used to be able to. So again, I can't tell you to stay. As a matter of fact, I'd recommend you go. A lot of houses have been saved by homeowners in their gardens. Set up the sprinklers, get your front yards pre-treated, your bushes pre-treated, and go. Anybody familiar with the, I know that the information's been going around, we put some information on our website, others have as well, with the Firewise community, the Firewise thought process of basically treating your own home before the wildfire comes through. And how you can do that is 30 feet of good solid defensible space, make sure your lawn's clipped, make sure the high grasses are cut down, the brush is away, the shrubs are trimmed up nicely. Your gutters are clean, and I'm just off the top of my head. Look it up. It's very readily available on the internet. If you got wood piles stacked up against your house, you don't want that, because anything that can carry a spark, that can take a spark and will carry a fire, will. I was on a fire down the Blue Mountains several years ago. It was a mega fire, 250,000 acre fire. It was blowing mostly through the mountains, but it started in just southeast of Dayton, Washington. And we got up there and we did a lot of structural protection. We saved some houses and we just helped out as best we could. And 5 days after the fire started, no houses had been lost. And then one burned to the ground because a spark had worked its way into a place and went dormant and smoldered and just got the right amount of air mixture to start a fire to burn the house down. So, but the problem was he had, he was a farmer. And if you're, have ever been a farmer in Eastern Washington or driven through Eastern Washington and looked at a lot of the houses, they collect a lot of things. And, they're out tending to their farms. They're out tending to their yards a lot. And so there's ways that you can prevent that happening at your own house, and that's basically before the fire comes. Treat your house, and clean up the shrubs, clean up the brush, the leaves, and make sure that if a fire comes through, that an ember can't grab and burn your house. So, any questions so far? I tend to talk, I tend to bounce back and forth, and
we've got a lot of bark in our backyard
Uh-huh.
as ground cover. I keep that as wet as I can for the summertime. That seems to me to be a fire risk for us.
Absolutely.
Um,
Beauty bark fires are one of the largest responses that South King County responds to in the summertime. And most of the time it's because of a careless smoker. Because there's a lot of beauty bark in businesses in front of the grocery stores, and they do use a lot of that. So yes, beauty bark. The good thing about it is it doesn't grow fast. It smolders, but it's still a fire. It's still a hazard. So yeah, if you keep it treated, yes, that would be the way to maintain it. So.
Two questions. One has to do with insurance. My insurance rates just went up a lot because they reclassified our area down here to a more dangerous zone because of the distance to the fire department. And I'm just wondering what the response time would be for people on Gold Beach if something were to get called in. We understand how thin sometimes the volunteer rates are and all of that. But what would be your expectation that if all of a sudden a fire got called in right here, for example, for a response?
Chief, I'll defer to you on that one.
Oh, great. I was like, gonna start cringing back. It's difficult. For example, because you got reclassified doesn't mean we have no one coming out of Dockham, which is the nearest station. It means we didn't meet the State Rating Bureau's classification of having 6 firefighters living within 5 miles of that station. Right now, we actively have 1 firefighter living within footsteps of that station. So for example, if we tone out for a fire and Brett's available, he'll be here with a truck fairly shortly, the drive from Dockham. Okay, and I will give Brett kudos. We had a fire recently on Summerhurst, I believe?
Sandy Shore.
Sandy Shores. And exactly that happened. We were all dispatched. Most of us respond from downtown, the main station. But he responded from Dockham, was there alone, made some critical decisions and saved the house on his own. He came in and just did the cleanup and the finish knockdown. So that's likely what will happen here. As chief will be here first, he'll start the action, he'll make some critical decisions. And the most important thing he can do is, he knows he has help coming, he can start explaining to help what he needs, how he needs things done. He can see if he needs more tenders, so he can put out, what we do is, first tones get us started, we may put out more tones for more help. Because that may, a volunteer may be home not working that day, off duty, but then he sees the thing starts buzzing and bleeping, and he says, well, this is a big deal, I better go. So that way we can get more help coming again.
So he never gets to go on vacation, is it?
Well, I don't encourage him to ever leave the island. I've actually offered to go shopping for him.
I think we could take advantage of, we'll all go shopping.
Yeah.
Come down to the beach anytime.
So it's a very difficult answer for you, and it's not an encouragement, but the primary response is going to be from the main station in Vashon proper.
Yeah.
And what is that, about 10 minutes, or?
It's depending on how fast we drive, what lights, who's in front of us, if it's there, don't know what to do, it's on and on and on. And they may be in Burton as well. The two considered main stations on the island are Burton and the main station. They're both classified. We have enough volunteers serving out of Burton, so they can get a jump on the main station slightly. So we'll be here as fast as we can. That's what I can give you.
Yeah.
And the other issue is, well, the tenders might be right out on us, but tenders can't go fast. When you're carrying 3,000 gallons of water and you go left, it takes a long time for the water to go left. So we encourage them to go a bit slower, but get there. Okay. But the primary guys will make here, and they'll make critical decisions that will set up a successful attack. I hope that's a good
No,
answer.
thank you. I just wanted to get some kind of perspective.
Yeah.
The second question I have is, a few years back, it was in August, in fact, Roger Deaver was here and happened to be visiting us at the time. He's now a full-time resident. But we had a fire that occurred up on the bluff.
Mm-hmm.
And so Roger and myself and Steve Gehring, we called it into 911. First of all, that was a cluster. They had no idea where we were. Is your house on fire? No, it's up on the bluff. Where are you? And I guess we were calling somewhere in Shorewood or something like that. I have no idea who we were talking to. But that response really wasn't particularly satisfying because it really was difficult to communicate what actually was going on and where we were. We got in the car and we hightailed it up to the entrance point where the gate is. And we were there And then I think it was a volunteer person showed up in an SUV, and they had no idea who had the key to the lock for the gate. And so they were there fairly quickly to respond in whatever way they could, to do some recon, figure out where the fire was and what have you, but they just didn't, there wasn't any communication going on as to who had the key to the lock to open the gate to get up to where the fire was. So I'm just wondering, I know Roger wrote a letter, it was presented to someone here on the Gold Beach Community Board. Whether it made its way to your department or not, I don't know for sure, but he highlighted exactly what those issues were and so forth, and I'm just hoping that between then, a few years ago, and now, there's been some plan developed or some kind of response, so that if and when that occurs up there, that there's some communication, that people know how to get the darn gate open and get the lock off.
Well, let me jump in. There's multiple questions in there. So
Okay.
I hit them. So let's start with calling 911. When you call 911, depending if you're on a cell phone or a landline, you're going to get anybody. If you're on a landline, you're going to get King County sheriffs. Okay. If you're on a cell phone, you can get any tower anywhere and get transferred to anyone. So the trick is, try to be as concise and as curt in your answers as possible, but as informative. For example, you want to say, I'm on Vashon, I'm reporting a fire. Say it several times if you don't think you're getting results. The dispatchers will be skilled, and they'll have books in front of them. They say, okay, Vashon fire, and then they'll start drilling in on you. But know you're on Vashon, tell them you're on Vashon, because they don't know where you are. And tell them it's a fire, because that may change you. Let's say you get King County Sheriff's, and they're going to transfer you to our dispatch, which is an entirely different system. I appreciate it feels frustrating. You think time is slipping by, but time feels longer when you're in this kind of crisis. It really is seconds happening. So let them know it's Vashon. You see there's a thread there. Let them know it's Vashon. Tell them it's fire. That'll get you the dispatch. They'll start asking you information. Try to tell them exactly the address. For example, that's, what is that?
7900 Southwest 260th Street is what
Wow,
was there.
I was trying to guess the cross streets. So this is why these guys make me look good and I'm the comic book.
Now, that gets us to the bluff. Now, if there's a fire in the park proper that you access off the gate halfway down towards Stockton, that's 8600 Southwest 260th.
So sometimes
Makes a difference.
sometimes it takes us time to find the address. Matter, you may remember last summer we lost 2 houses on the other side of that. Those calls didn't come from the Vashon. They started coming from Kitsap. And they're making best guesses of where the address was. So there's another clue. If you see smoke, you see something you think's a fire, or you're concerned, don't think your neighbor called us. We'd rather have 100 911 calls than one well into the fire. So we encourage you, we'd rather come out, find nothing, and go home than come out late and find a conflagration. Okay, so that's another cue. So finding as accurate as an address as you can. Okay. Now the gentleman, the volunteer, young lady, young man, were they in a private car, their own
I
car?
believe it was a private SUV.
Okay, so what happens there is the volunteers are just that. They're just like you driving around. If we're lucky, they may have chosen to keep their gear in the car, which most of them does. I lived close enough to the station when I was a volunteer, I left it at the station. It would force me to go get a truck. The volunteers there will keep their gear in the car, but we don't give them radios, don't have enough. We don't give them keys to all the parks. Parks doesn't like that. Okay? So the fact that they did what they did is compiled information, they were prepared to present that information to the first arriving units is brilliant. I commend them. All of the engines and the command vehicles, which are the SUVs, they have keys to these parks. And so they'll have a key to get into that gate. Okay? If the truck shows up and doesn't have a key in its department, they can cut that lock. They'll cut the chain to get in. So those are the ways to approach that. But a volunteer is really just someone who's out of the love of their heart protecting the community, maybe they're pursuing a career, whatever their logic is, they're coming with what they have. And they're just getting there before we get there. Okay. Yes, sir?
I have a question about your water source down here. If there were a good-sized fire on the hill, per se, and I heard you say one of the trucks is 3,000 gallons.
Actually, we have 3 3,000-gallon tenders and 1 1,500.
Do you ever have to, well, I guess you don't really know, but have you ever had to tap into the fire hydrants down here off of Gold Beach Water? And does
I don't
that
know,
work?
we have, yes.
We have in the past, yes. For structure fires, and for some brush fire activity, we've done that, yes.
If you run out, if a if a pumper runs out of water, how do you refill it if you're still fighting the fire down here?
Well, so the pumper is the first engine. They come with 700 gallons of water, plus or
Okay.
minus, okay? They'll set up and start taking the fire. If they take a hydrant, great, they have that water supply. If they can't get to a hydrant, the tenders start coming in. So the first tender becomes what we call a nurse. They will tie themselves permanently to that engine. So now that engine goes from whatever water supplies it has to an extra 3,000 gallons because that truck becomes part of it. We have the hose work to hook them up. The other 3 tenders then will start doing what we call shuttling. They'll find the nearest best hydrant. For example, in Doctor, we have a hot hydrant. It pushes out water very quickly. So they'll start running shuttles to go get that water. They fill up, come back, fill the nurse tender, go get water, come back. And we just keep doing that until we no longer need water. Does that make sense?
It does. Let me push you a little bit more
Please,
on my
please.
question, because I wanted to be real specific. Is there enough pressure from Gold Beach Water Company to fight a good-sized fire down here?
We have, and Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, as I understand it, the water's coming downhill, it's just gravity fed.
Yes.
So we're gonna get what pressure we have. We've successfully done that. Once we get the water, we can up the pressure. So the trick is not the pressure, the trick is, do we drain the volume of your system? And how large is your system? So we'll probably do both. If we have easy access to a hydrant, we'll probably grab those as we can. But there would be no reason not to start a shuttle operation as well.
Thank you.
Are they tested at all? Our hydrants? I know it's.
I'm going to default to you now. It's a private system as I understand it.
Yeah.
We were just talking today, just now, about maybe if there's a fire here, we call Harley.
Right.
So have them flip both switches so that both wells are operational. Right now you run one well at a time. So that would create a greater volume of water for us to drain out. But the trick is, I don't know how big your capacity is. We can go through water quickly or slowly, depending on the nature of the fire. The Singer Barn fire, I think we went through 35,000 gallons of water.
Yeah, so I've taken an action item to talk to Harley and ask him to just summarize the capacity of our system and get it to the fire department so they have it in their notes and they can incorporate that into whatever incident action plan they're working at the time. And then maybe we have a fast response procedure where if there's a fire call, we ask Harley to immediately turn on both pumps. And that way we're refilling faster than we normally need to.
Well, switching gears just a little bit, you were at the meeting that I attended earlier, we were talking about the purchase of the water system and so forth.
Right.
And I think it was Joe who said, yeah, I looked at the system, it's basically being kept together with baling wire and bubble gum. And so
Right.
it wasn't really encouraging, because the water system was not necessarily state-of-the-art. My concern is are there procedures, and perhaps you can ask this about Harley and our water system, but do we know? I think there are something, if I'm guessing right, 22 different fire hydrants down here in Lower Gold Beach. I know somebody went and counted them, and I think that's the number that they came up with. Are they functional? Are they tested on a periodic basis? Are they just left to assume that they're gonna work when you guys show up and, turn on the top? I mean, I'm just wondering how
Yeah, I don't
can
know
we
what
stay
they-
on top of that to know? Because if they're trying to sell the system, not putting any money to it and so forth, who's responsible for testing the hydrants? Because clearly, if we get a fire down here, that's critical infrastructure. So
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if maybe you can get that dialogue
Yeah.
incorporated.
Yeah, because I know this sanitary inspection they did in 2017, looking at that report, that was all focused on is the water safe to drink? And I didn't see any indication they were testing fire hydrants. I don't think the health department really does anything with fire hydrants, as far as I know.
By state law, all water systems are required to test their hydrants annually.
Oh, are they?
They're
Okay,
They're
that's good.
supposed to service them, they're supposed to clean around them annually.
Let's not make any
That's the operative word, it's supposed to.
Okay, well, you know how that works.
Right, there's a bit of cynicism in the room.
The thing about it is, there's no water police.
They're not gonna come out and check.
But maybe we can get Gold Beach Water
But do they have to
in one of
report
their
this?
billings
They're
to
supposed to
say
report to the state.
yours was tested and it's okay?
And they're supposed to
Right.
supply
Nice
us
to know.
with.
Yeah, well, if you're in a sales transition, that would be a good point to ask.
Yeah.
We're looking at this, how are the hydrants doing?
You know, my history with your water system, it's always been a moderate water system. It hasn't been the best, but it
Yeah.
certainly hasn't been the worst. We've got a few systems on the island which I won't even use their hydrants because it'll take me longer to fill a hydrant off of the fire hydrant at Mooring Mutual's water tanks than it is to drive to Portage and fill it up and come back. So it will take me longer to fill that truck off of that hydrant because here's the tank, here's the hydrant, and it's gravity flow, and it's just not good.
For a fire on these slopes here, would you ever envision calling through mutual aid from a fire boat out of Tacoma to hit the slope, or could they not reach very
If it
far?
was low enough, they're only reasonably gonna get 200 feet,
Oh, okay.
but I don't ever remember a fire starting low. It's always started above what used to be the road, the main road to the gravel pit, which became the trail after the earthquake.
Yeah,
It's always started there and burned uphill from
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
A few times it's crested and come across the top. Since the county took it over and has cleaned that top up around all the old foundations, you
Yeah.
know, it's less of a threat.
Right.
But still, there is a threat there.
What about the other side?
On the other side, to the east,
More Green Park, yeah.
The park?
the park itself, beach fires, and then we had a driftwood fire here 2 years ago, was that?
Yeah, for my first year.
And that's when we had the Tacoma Fire Boat come in and help us extinguish that one. So, the road that goes up out of Lower Goat Beach, I've only ever seen one fire on that hillside, so the houses above there, I've only ever seen it once. Doesn't mean it can't happen, but historically that has never been a place of fire concern for us. So, go ahead.
About every 3 weeks, somebody sets a campfire over the far side of the gravel pit in the upper plateau. And I was wondering if there's any way in which the fire department can monitor that with infrared scanners or?
No, no. Well, we have infrared scanners or thermal imaging cameras, but they're much, small capacity for us to carry into a fire looking for
Yeah,
fire on the wall. We don't have drones.
We don't have like a FLIR radar on a helicopter, we don't have anything like that. All we have is a handheld.
There's handy power poles and everything in the gravel pit. Buried in the trees up there. It's
Yep.
naked.
So, the gravel pit's now county.
County.
Yeah, so if you, when in doubt, you think it's over there, county prohibits fires on their property, so feel free to call sheriffs.
So I actually sent them an email and got no reply.
Okay. Yeah, if you encounter a fire on the property, just a campfire, the first offense is to call 911 and invite King County Sheriff to come take care of it, because it's actually their responsibility. If it's just a fire, if it's a campfire and a bunch of kids having a party, it's the county sheriff's responsibility. Over the years, I've been threatened. I've had weapons pulled on me when I told people they had to put their fires out. So we tend to try to let King County go do that first.
Sounds good.
They get to carry guns. I get to carry a shovel, and I'm sure it does some damage, but, you know. You have to
Yeah,
come back to
I have a natural gas question. So a couple of years ago, there were several neighbors in this sort of particular corridor who described smelling gas. And I know there's like the rotten egg smell versus what we might, initially think was a gas smell, whatever, leaving that aside. At one point, I ended up calling PSC and they sent somebody out from the mainland, in the middle of the night, like 1 a.m. And he checked all around and he concluded in the end that it must have been a ship going by. And I mean, that just seems a little strange. And he said that one time that something similar had happened, that people over on Magnolia had like 80 houses had called in the smell of a natural gas leak, and that it was a ship and the wind currents. But could you just talk a little bit about natural gas safety, any response to that hypothesis?
For basically to smell that quantity of natural gas, there has to be a pretty good leak that you should be able to, they should be able to find, they should be able to tell. If you smell it at your house and you have natural gas, first check all your gas appliances and make sure that they are functioning properly. If you smell it coming from the neighbor's house, call 911, we'll come out and take a look. Because what we can do is we come out and we turn the meter off. We generally call the gas company, but we can come turn that meter off, and then if the house needs to be ventilated, for instance, if nobody's home, and we can, gain access through Key County Sheriff's Office again, because they actually have to do the breaking in. And then basically we can ventilate that out. But, yeah, as far as natural gas, fortunately, we don't get a lot of natural gas problems on Vashon. A few times, Backhoe, they're doing some work on the main line. If you're familiar with the gas system, we have a trunk line comes across over at Point Robinson Lighthouse, comes across Mooring, it heads north and goes out off the west side of the island. And it's a large, I don't even remember how big the pipe is. It's like 20-inch diameter. When they hit that thing, we had to do a fire response standby, and it sounded like a jet engine. It was pushing so much pressure out. You don't have to worry about that here. You got small feeder lines off of that main trunk, but most times we've had a gas problem. It's been because the contractor didn't call for a locate and hit it with a shovel, or a homeowner hit it with a shovel. Do you know where your gas lines are running through your yard? Because we don't, and I'm quite sure a contractor wouldn't either. So that's the thing, is that's when we really get gas leaks problems. Most of the modern appliances these days aren't like they used to be, where you have a pilot light that if it blew out, it would continue to leak gas. They're electronic and they start electronically, so that's not that big of an issue. For him to, I've never heard of a ship. They don't run on natural gas that I'm aware of.
You get one tote, and two of the totes will be soon,
Do they?
but they're in the middle of the channel.
Yeah. Unless they're purging their tanks for whatever reason,